It's the day after UFC 283, and it's time to break down the action and the after action from the card. Pretty good card. Just like kind of summarize it at the top. Pretty good card. Didn't do particularly well on the pick count. Win-loss record was not great, and some fights were completely off. And particularly, I think probably I'm thinking that because I was wrong on the main event. I was wrong on the co-main, and I mean very, very wrong. I was wrong on the Shogun Hua fight, so like 3 losses on the main card as opposed to 3 wins, so a split on the main card on the pay-per-view section of it. Undercard did better, but, that tends to also be where the easiest stuff is. Like, I'm not going to take a huge amount of credit for being like, you know what, Jailton Almeida is going to beat Shamil Abdurakhimov when he's a minus 1,200 favorite. Like, I'm not going to take a lot of credit for that. But it was an okay night of picks. We'll put it that way. Okay night of picks. Good night of fights. There were some problems, some controversies. Not on like judging for a change. Like, I think every judge's decision rendered went the right way. There is one fight that I'm going to talk about the judging being, I think, a little bit off, personally. But at the same time, I get it. And then and then there is one round. I don't understand how all 3 judges have Davidson Figueiredo winning a round. I don't get it. We'll get more into that when I get to that fight. But I think more than usual, this card has some bad takes afterwards that are leaving a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. Despite the fact that, realistically speaking, the action in the cage was very, very solid. But the action of the crowd, the action of the fans on social media, less so. There you go. And just another reminder, Dana White, domestic abuser, should be sending his money to some kind of domestic abuse support system, charity, etc. There should be a punishment for what he did. I'm on my soapbox here for a moment. And if you believe his wife should face a punishment, well, guess what? That's half her money. So there you go. In the main event, we had Glover Teixeira versus Jamal Hill. Now, I thought this fight would go Glover's way, obviously. I thought he was the better striker. I thought he was the better grappler. I thought that his wrestling would be good enough to get this to the ground. We hadn't really seen Jamal Hill defend serious takedowns. Now we have. It's actually pretty good. He was actually really well drilled at how to defend against a single leg. Glover did get some takedowns. Notably in the 5th round, he got a leg takedown, did get to side control, but in the end, Hill got out of it, got reversed. Didn't run into a particular amount of trouble on the ground. And on the feet, he was working an excellent game. Like the fast, decent, solid combinations. Particularly, he was switching to the southpaw stance and throwing high kicks, which Glover appeared to be completely unprepared for. And this was an amazing fight for Jamal Hill in a lot of ways. I do think if you look at my Twitter timeline, I was saying in the 2nd and 3rd round that he looked like he was getting tired, but he never actually did really crash. He kept going. I have no doubt that he was tired. He was breathing heavily, mouth was open, etc. These are all things that may come into play in later fights, but he never stopped. Like, his best round was the 4th round, where he had Glover hurt badly, almost finished him, had John Hackelman, longtime coach of Glover, talking to Glover's corner, he's not in his corner these days, about throwing in the towel, about stopping the fight. And he was overruled on that, which technically, obviously should be the case. Like, the corner is in charge of whether the towel gets thrown in or not. The thoughts of someone who's not in the corner team shouldn't really impact that. But we're going to talk more about corner stoppages later. I didn't necessarily have a problem with the corner not throwing a towel in here because there was always this tease of a hope that on paper, Glover was one takedown away from being able to turn this around. He was one takedown and a back take and a rear naked choke away from winning the title. Obviously, that wasn't the case because he got that takedown again in the 5th round and Hill got out of it. So, a fantastic performance by Jamal Hill. Amazing. the emotional ride of roller coaster of emotions he went through afterwards suggests that maybe he should consider some therapy. Or if he's already going through therapy, awesome. But it was a bit much. It was a bit much. Whatever. If it was just about winning the title and the happiness, the sadness, the rage progression that he went through there is just that. It's whatever. But I don't know if that's a part of your normal life. There probably should be something you should think about looking into. There you go. Glover Teixeira was incredibly classy. Retired. Asked the crowd not to throw stuff at Jamal Hill, which is classy. And by the way, that was particularly the bad part of the crowd. The crowd did two things that kind of really annoyed me. One is that we're going to talk about the Brandon Moreno Davidson Figueiredo fight, obviously, but they threw stuff at Brandon Moreno as he was exiting the arena area, the fight area, I guess, and they also seemed to leave. Like the crowd looked a lot more empty during the main event, so they got angry that Figueiredo didn't win the title, and then they kind of, to be honest, they took it out on Hill and Glover because the business doesn't care. Like a serious note here. Let's say that you want to do a fight card at a 25,000 seat arena. You sell 23, 24,000 of those seats, and something climactically bad happens like midway through the card and people leave. They have your money. So the only people, it was basically just Glover having less of a hero's welcome and Jamal Hill having less of a live crowd for when he won his title. So they're the only ones that suffered from that. So that is, I think, a bit rude. And there are two really weird takes coming out of this card. Number one, and this is the one that I heavily dislike, is there's a lot of Jamal Hill fans / if we're being honest, domestic abuse fans who are coming out of the work and being like, where's all the critiques about Jamal Hill now? As if becoming UFC champion makes any of his thoughts on some of the things he said about women's physical appearances or domestic abuse more relevant. Like they suddenly have greater import or significance because he's a champion. They don't. Like personally, I will speak really just for myself here. Nothing about this fight changes my opinion of Jamal Hill, the person, or Jamal Hill, the character he plays on social media, if it's some kind of elaborate illusion. Because why would it? Like, when Jamal Hill when I first saw Jamal Hill fight, which admittedly was on Dana White's Contender Series, hadn't seen his regional career before that. I've gone back and watched some of them now. I knew that Jamal Hill could kick my butt. So any opinion I have ever expressed about him has been with that in mind. So him winning the title doesn't change that framework in any way. And the other take is there's a lot of people who seem to believe that this fight, because Jamal Hill beat Glover worse than Yuri did, and he did, to be clear. Like, Glover and Yuri had a competitive fight that Glover was ahead on the cards at the time of the submission, was on his way to probably retaining the title. And there was none of that here. I had this 10-9, 10-9, 10-9, 10-8 in the fourth round, 10-9 again. So I had all 5 rounds for Hill, and they were not close. Like, these were clean cut 10-9s, probably 10-8s under like my ideal scoring system, where the 10-8 becomes more prevalent and the 10-7 actually becomes a thing. But I don't think it actually really impacts the way I look at a potential fight between Prochazka and Hill, which is my recommended next fight for those two. Because it's just a really, really different matchup. Yuri Prochazka is the type of guy who, because of his lack of regard for defense and violence avoidance, will probably have a relatively competitive fight with anyone in the top 50. Like, if you were to put Yuri Prochazka up against anyone that was on this card at 205, like Paul Craig, I could see him getting submitted by Paul Craig. I could see him having a kind of interesting fight with Johnny Walker, despite being a way better fighter. I could even see, now this one scratches my head a little bit, but I could even see Ihor Potieria and Yuri Prohaska having a decent fight. That's the style of fighter that he is. He would crush Shogun. Shogun looks sad. So that hasn't really changed. Like with Hill, my questions remain. What happens if he faces significant adversity and an opponent that can keep up with him on a pace and physical level, which I think Yuri can do. So that's a fantastically interesting fight, despite the fact that their common opponent resulted in Glover getting beat down by Hill and having a competitive fight with Yuri Prohaska. For Glover, retirement is the answer. He retired after the fight. I wish him the best in that, and focusing on Alex Pereira's training camps. He's 43 years old. It was time to go. That is the other thing, is that I think part of Hill's domination here was Glover not looking that good. I'm not saying this win means nothing or whatever. No, Hill fought an amazing fight. But I do think that Glover, who already wasn't looking prior to this, a particularly amazing physical athlete, did look a little bit reduced. I think honestly, if you go back and watch his fight with Yuri Prohaska, he rises to the occasion, and here he just didn't. But still, congratulations to Jamal Hill for proving that there's something there. Like a guy who I looked at previously as just kind of a physical bully, who had all the physical elements of a good fighter, but not a lot of the understanding or the nuance or the depth, went out there and showed techniques I hadn't seen from him before, depths I hadn't seen from him before, and the idea that, like, no, this guy is actually probably quite hard to take down. And on the ground, despite the comical fight with Paul Craig, he actually does know what he's doing. So yeah, no, I think my estimation of his fighter went up huge. My estimation of his opinions about anything not fight related have not. There you go. Moving on to the other title fight, we had Brandon Moreno versus Davidson Figueiredo, the fourth one. Round 4 between these two. I scored all 3 rounds for Moreno. He outvolumed him in all rounds. He was able to initiate takedowns, although if I'm being honest, he didn't really achieve much with the takedowns. Figueiredo was able to scramble out. He was able to lock up guillotine position, but I don't even think he was really had a guillotine to it. But it didn't look like he had anything really good to go on. Honestly, there was a bit of a heel hook attempt in the first round, but it didn't look like he had any answers on the feet. Like, it looked like Moreno really had moved in there, and that essentially Figueiredo was just looking to land like a really hard shot. And that was kind of it. Like, the second round, which is the round Figueiredo got given, he did pull off a nice reversal after getting taken down and put on a guillotine. But the guillotine was not close. I don't think it really... It's not that it's nothing, but I don't think that it was anything significant. And if we pull up the numbers... Can't believe I don't have the numbers up here. UFC stats for UFC 283. And keeping in mind, there were no like significantly big like shots here. There were, significant strikes and whatever. But if we look at the strikes, 17-5 in the first round, 17-10 in the second round, and 14-4 in the third round. All in favor of Moreno. And, that's not a massive thing or whatever, but I don't see what Figueiredo did in that second round to pick up anything. Like a takedown, getting outlanded, and a quote-unquote sub-attempt really shouldn't do it. Really shouldn't. So I thought Moreno won that one as well. And then in the third, it was more of the same, but Moreno hits him with a knuckle to the eye. Figueiredo, I think, tried to sell it as an eye poke. And that's not a impugnment of Figueiredo's character on the matter. That I think it probably felt like it. But no, Moreno hit him with a punch, And that was it with that. In the end, the doctor came in, waved off. It took a long time for the doctor to wave this off, considering that eye was swollen completely shut. Like, there was no way Figueiredo could see out of that eye. After the fight, we previously to this already had Shogun announce his retirement, and then we had, of course, Glover later on the night. But Figueiredo took the gloves off, didn't retire, wasn't expecting him to retire, but he said, "I'm done with flyweight." Essentially, we're moving up to 135. Moreno gets to do not something new, because I'm suggesting that he fight Alexander Pantoja, who he has fought before. So obviously that's not a new opponent, but it's an opponent that's not Deiveson Figueiredo, at least. And for Figueiredo at 135, I'm not particularly picky with what you do. The only thing I would not do is I would not do two things. One, I would not put him in there with some kind of big beefy wrestler, because like the question mark for Figueiredo going up a weight class is going to be, okay, how does he deal with size? And you got to test it at some point. I'm not saying never test it. I'm not saying never put him against a Merab Dvalishvili or someone of that ilk, because at some point it's going to happen if you're on the quest for a title. But I wouldn't do it right away. Like, let him go up, give him a tough fight, a fight that asks questions, but not necessarily a fight that he's likely to lose. Or if he is, then it'll actually be a boost in stock for the guy who beats him. And avoid like a super tall guy like Corey Sandhagen. So I would go with the winner of Adrian Yanez versus Rob Font myself. That's the fight that I think really works, because with Font, you have a guy who is fading, but still has solid range tools to keep the fight interesting. And with Yanez, you have someone who is up and coming, kind of making a name for himself in the division. And I think that's a big fight that you could make that would be pretty exciting. In the non-title fight portion of the card, the most shocking part of the Gilbert Burns Dale Magny fight was actually John Anik talking about how Magny trains with that Burns trains with Jason Jackson, who's a Bellator fighter, and Delano Taylor, who's a PFL fighter, as prep for Magny. It was weird. It's weird to get shout-outs for those two promotions in a UFC event with someone who isn't attached to it in any way. Burns got a takedown reasonably early on in this fight. The stand-up wasn't super interesting, but Burns got the takedown. Almost mounts Magny. Magny has a good moment of like scrambling, using his length, using his legs to push him away. But Burns eventually does get the mount and ends up with an arm triangle for the tap out in the first round. Pretty much went how I thought it would do. I had thought rear naked choke myself, but arm triangle also makes a lot of sense. Like, this is a fight that we have seen Magny in before, multiple times actually. Because I mean, essentially, it's the RDA fight and the Demi and Maya fight again. Both fights that he lost, but against in both cases someone more physically imposing. Because of course Maya is relatively old at the time that they fought, and not super physical. Like Burns is a way more physical grappler than Maya is, and he's a bigger grappler than RDA is. So there was no surprises here. I don't think it really inflates Burns' stock at all, although it does get him back on the winning track. And for Magny, I think he just stays what he was. Burns wanted Colby Covington, called him out in the post fight. I still think that Colby and Chimaev is, in my opinion, the way to go. I think that's a highly marketable fight. I think the trash talk is intriguing. Now, granted, it's a heel versus heel match, to use professional wrestling parlance, where it's the bad guy versus the bad guy, and that might not sit terribly well with the crowd. But there's enough people that treat Colby and Chimaev as the heroes of the story, and are very confused when they're not treated as such. So I think that fight has tremendous upside. I think it's also very interesting. I think it sets up a title contender. And with Burns, I don't think it does, because we saw Burns against Usman and be competitive. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think there's any clamoring for that to see that again. So I wouldn't put him up against Colby or Chimaev. I guess I could stomach the Colby fight. I just don't know what you do with Chimaev then, because I don't think you put Chimaev against Bilal Muhammad, because I think that's a huge risk, and I don't think you put him against Shavkat Rakhmonov, and those are like the other faces up there. So I have Burns versus Bilal as my pick, and Neil Magny versus Jeremiah Wells, because Magny is a gatekeeper. I want to see him fighting the up and comers who need to be tested. Be like, okay, here is a very clear trap fight where you have a tall guy who's really good at the clinch and will sucker you into it. Do you fall for it? Or if you do fall for it, can you just win that anyways? And that's the sort of test I'd like to see against Jeremiah Wells. Moving on to Jessica Andrade versus Lauren Murphy. We're going to talk about like corner stoppages here for a moment, because all of these rounds could have potentially been 10-8. I scored round 2 as a 10-9. Looking at the stats, I'm not really sure I can justify that, but it felt, I don't want to say close, because it didn't feel close. It did not feel close. But it felt like the round where Murphy trying to go for takedowns at least prevented her from just getting lit up. Because every time she stood in the pocket or at range with Andrade, she did not have anything. And when she went for takedown, she was unable to get a single one. Was not even close. And I think the Murphy corner was terrible in this fight, because we're getting stuff like, we believe in you. We need you to wrestle. When she's already wrestling, you need to give more specific advice. She has defended her corner, and that is her business. She wanted positivity in the corner. She knew she was losing. Whatever. But what is the point of that positivity? What does it lead to? Because the positivity was just like kind of sending her back out there to keep getting eaten up time and time again. And of course, every time you say this about a female fighter, there's always like the double standard concern. It's a legitimate concern, because people are like, well, if this was a Diaz brother, you'd be cheering it. But I think I can confidently say that I would not be. I have never been a big fan of, number one, I've never really been cheering for the Diaz brothers, like, full stop. Not really a fan, honestly. It takes me cheering against the guy they're against to get me on the Diaz's side. But ignoring the Diaz thing and talking about it all, there are fighters who have a proven track record of being able to finish somebody in the late stages of a fight and having danger and having something to build off of. And that's the type of fight that I would have no problem with continuing on. In this case, going into the third round, Murphy had lost the first 2 rounds. On my cards, was behind 10-17. On other cards, she was behind 20-17 or behind 20-16. Nothing had worked. There was no building blocks. There was no aspect of her striking game that was working. There was no aspect of her grappling game that was even getting out of first gear. That was honestly, not even getting into first gear, getting out of neutral. And the physical mismatch was just so apparent that I don't know, particularly given that I believe her husband is in the corner, I don't know how you don't throw that towel in. And there are people, including Murphy, who are like, no, the corner is there to do what the fighter wants and to be supportive and to be whatever. That's patently false, because the corner has the ability to throw a towel in. If a fighter wants to quit. They can tap out. They can signal to their corner that they're done. The corner, vis-a-vis the towel throw-in, is there to protect the fighter from themselves, from their own pride, stubbornness, bravery, stupidity, whatever label you want to put on it. The corner is there to override that and act as a impartial, not necessarily impartial, but an outside objective judge. So this idea that the fighter wouldn't want the towel thrown in has to go out the door. And I get it. It's like, okay, well, they'll leave. Here's the thing, like, particularly in this case, your husband's in the corner. Have the husband throw the towel in. If the wife is going to, if Lauren Murphy's going to leave her husband overthrowing the towel in, that marriage is not built on any kind of solid foundation. That's all. So the towel should have been thrown in here. She got beaten up for really no reason. And yeah, she got 10-8'd on like I think, 2 cards twice in a UFC fight where they do not give 10-8s very easily. Anyways. Andrade, I have fighting Manon Fiorot or taking a strawweight title shot, honestly. And for Murphy, I have a fight with Miranda Maverick, maybe, because it feels like Miranda Maverick probably can do a lot of the same things Andrade did, and I'm kind of curious to see if it happens. But it's on a way lower level than Andrade. So there you go. She just has kind of a similar physical profile. And that's all I have to say on this fight. This fight was not interesting. It was a slaughter. Paul Craig versus Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker trying to be capital T technical. Craig grabs his leg, and immediately we get old Johnny Walker, where it's like, here we go! Time to hammer fist our way to a stoppage. There's not much else to say about this. Walker did Walker things, got a TKO in the first round. Maybe was a little bit of an early stoppage. I don't have a problem with it. Walker versus, I guess, Volkan Oezdemir is the fight that makes the most sense, but it's entirely unsexy. And for Paul Craig, I had a really hard time finding an opponent for him. My best thing would be if Alonzo Menifield beats Jimmy Crute, that fight would make sense. I guess, to be honest, even if Crute does beat Menifield, it's still Menifield, because I don't want to see the rematch between Craig and Crute. That's a fight that serves no purpose. And of course, the question is, does Paul Craig just retire? Because he's talked about retirement before. He's talked about being done. And then, the, I guess, vague prospect of a title shot brought him back to the table and brought him back to rededicating to MMA. But I don't know if after this fight there's any real hope of that. I mean, I guess there's the laughable fact that he does have a win over the current champion. But I don't know. There's not much for him. Speaking of retirement, Mauricio Shogun, who fought Ihor Pataria. I thought he would win this fight. Not really because of anything about him. I just didn't think Pataria is very good. I still don't think Pataria is very good. I think he is... I think he has a base level of competence, but I still don't think that there's any real depth to him. I think this was an execution, essentially. Shogun, right from the beginning, really didn't look into it. There was a stumble he had early on that was very not Shogun. He got cut up pretty early. There was some clinching that Shogun had no real answers for. Got hurt with the right hand, got finished. Pataria did a little duelist flair thing, I guess, which makes sense given his nickname, but he's it's also not disrespectful. I'm is not doing a duelist flair actually disrespectful, in duelist culture? Is that not was that not an insult back in the day? I don't know. I don't know if this really does anything for Pataria other than he now has a win in the UFC, and as a result, I have him against Maxine Grishin. Shogun retired. Hopefully that sticks. Moving on. Gregory Rodriguez versus Bruno Ferreira. Ferreira did almost everything wrong. Honestly, he got hit with uppercuts a lot. RoboCop, was hurt, was pressured, and Ferreira, won via knockout. But there wasn't a lot here that actually was any better than what I saw in the Day and White Contender Series. Ferreira is a monster. Super powerful, fast, explosive. He's got all of that going for him. It's amazing. But I don't actually know if he's any good. And don't get me wrong, this is middleweight, so that describes a lot of prospects. I think he belongs here. I think he's exciting. I think he's a good addition to the division. I just think that there were a lot of people whose takeaway from this was Bruno Ferreira is actually amazing and is going to be a contender. I don't think anything here actually said that. Rodriguez is defensively deficient, gets clipped all the time, gets hurt a lot, just tends to come back. I guess that's the impressive thing, is that Ferreira put him out essentially with one shot. And that's something we haven't seen before. Ferreira versus Joaquin Buckley is my pick. and Gregory Rodriguez versus Andre Petroski. Petroski's been saying how about like I'm the greatest grappler in the division, blah 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 blah. The answer is it's probably Hidalgo Vieira, but you could put him in there with Gregory Rodriguez. It's an exciting fight, and it's a chance for Petroski to show what he's got because Rodriguez is not a guy that you usually really out grapple. Like when he gets aggressive, he'll give up position and so on. I guess you consider that out grappling, but not in the way that Petroski usually does. And he has stand up to really probably rock Petroski's world. And the Buckley fight, it's just two like short guys who are like super powerhouse dudes, and it'd be interesting. And I think we've found the hard cap ceiling for Buckley. If it wasn't the Razak Al Hassan fight, then certainly the Chris Curtis fight. And if it wasn't that, it was the Imavov fight. There you go. And then we had Thiago Moises versus Melk Costa. I thought Costa started out pretty well. Moises went for an early takedown, couldn't get it. Even tried to kind of make it a guard pull. Takedowns were defended. Costa was doing a good job at range, mixing things up. Nothing huge, nothing super big, nothing that hurt Moises particularly badly. But he was doing his thing, and even when he did get taken down, he got back up and hit a spin kick to the knee. That was kind of a weird one. Moises had a couple counters going for him as well, though. Like it was a round that kind of went a little bit like I thought it would, except that more pro Costa. Like Costa definitely, game opponent, ready to go, had answers for some things. And then in the second round, Moises runs in, gets a takedown, about 90 seconds in, ends up finding the back, it's a running joke, does his thing. It's amazing. It's not necessarily amazing, but it was a good performance by Moises for a late notice replacement, getting it done. But I have to say, I think Guram Kataladze would have murked him. And I think that's the rebook. Like, he called out Paddy Pimblett. You're not getting that fight. That's all there is to it. Although, side note, I did say that to somebody that it's not crazy to think that Paddy Pimblett could actually beat Thiago Moises, because the keys to Moises' wins tend to very much be tricky grappling and grappling-based offense. And that is something that probably actually Paddy can handle, but it's not a high enough profile fight for the risk. And they really like to pick guys who can't hurt him. And Moises has a good counter game. He's not particularly hard-hitting, not a huge finisher or anything, but he does sting on the counter, and I think that it just looked bad for Paddy. So if you're going to have Paddy lose, I think you still do it with a Renato Moicano who wants money or something like that. Or you do it with someone up and coming that you're going to build off of. Like Moises is not that guy. He's the guy that isn't being paid enough for his wife to not have two jobs to work. Which, by the way, again, fighter pay moment. Seriously. Come on. There are bigger things about the fighter pay, honestly. Probably Jamal Hill's paycheck for main eventing this card is the argument. And for Costa, I like him, and another guy I like who took a loss in his debut was Michael Figlak. Put them in there. I'd be very interested in that fight. Gabriel Bonfim, who I picked to beat Munir Lazzez, but I thought it would be a competitive fight. No. Bonfim just going at him, putting the pressure on Lazzez, actually provoked a takedown from Lazzez, sunk in a guillotine choke, got the win. Great debut for Bonfim. We're going to talk about his brother a little bit later, but spoiler, he also won, so a great night for the Bonfim brothers. The fight I would love to see Bonfim have, I would really love to see him have, is Elizeu Zaleski. I think that would be fantastic. And for Munir Lazzez, Brian Battle. They're two tall dudes who I have pretty much the same questions about. Is what happens if you just don't have reach and height? And he had reach in this one, but Bonfim just ripped through him. Bonfim is a terrifying guy. That's an up and coming dude at welterweight. Jailton Almeida versus Shamil Abdurrahimov was a thing. Almeida was able to get takedowns, and Abdurrahimov was able to scramble back up early. Eventually that stopped happening. And Almeida was basically just kind of doing a back mount, trade off, and eventually got a. Did he stop him? I am blanking legitimately on how he won. That's how unmemorable this fight was. Yeah, it was a TKO. TKO. Yeah, he didn't get the submission, but he threatened arm triangles, threatened rear naked chokes, got the stoppage in the second round. I would like to see Almeida versus the winner of Derek Lewis versus Sergey Spivak. It's an actually testing fight. And for Shamil, if he's not going to retire and he's not going to get cut, I hope he doesn't get cut. He is still good enough. He is still, in the grand scheme of heavyweight, good enough to fight in the UFC. So if he wants to continue, I hope it is. Alexei Olenek, give me the old man Russian battle. Let it happen. Let's see what happens. And Almeida's moving on through the world. Still hasn't really gotten a great test, so I'm still waiting on that because like Abdurakhimov and Parker Porter are kind of the bottom of the division in terms of like physicality. So we'll still see. Down to Luan Lucerda versus Cody Stemmen. Cody won the first 2 rounds, I thought. Decent striking performance, I guess. Slight edge in significant strikes landed, slight edge in volume, some nice counters. Lacerda looked okay on the feet, but like he's always never been a particularly great guy. And it was really that, in the third round, Lacerda got a takedown, got some control. Tried for a guillotine, did not work. And at the end, he started working some really nice body work, actually. I was really happy to see Lacerda working the body of Stamen a lot, actually. I'm always happy for good body work. But at the end of the day, Stamen is just full stop. Stamen shouldn't be the guy you're fighting on your debut. And that's really all I would say. Lacerda looks fine, but like he's not going to be anything. He's just going to be kind of like a low end action fighter. And I wouldn't mind seeing him fight Simon Oliveira. It's kind of lazy to use a guy from earlier in the card, but like it'd be fun. And Stamen versus Jack Shore, because I fully believe Jack Shore is going to defeat Makwan Amirkhani in let's just say I don't have faith in Amirkhani anymore. Let's just put it that way. Terrence McKinney versus Ismail Bonfim. I thought Bonfim would be trouble. I thought McKinney would win. I thought he would bring too much at the beginning. He would overload him with the physicality and the offensive progressions that he has. That did not happen. McKinney actually came out kind of composed and reserved, like he's trying to work on extending his ability to fight beyond the 2-minute mark. But it didn't really work out for him there. Bonfim kind of just worked him. He won the first round with some solid strikes and so on. And then in the second round, knocked him out with a jumping knee. That's a big win for Ismail Bonfim. Granted, McKinney is kind of a weird one because it's hard to say what to really take him. Because obviously, on one hand, super athletic fighter, super dangerous fighter. On the other hand, horribly gasses out and breaks down and doesn't have a game that exists long term. So it's kind of weird. Like what does that mean? But no, like Bonfim is a really good fighter. I think he's actually the more technically sound of the two brothers, and I'm really looking forward to what he can do. I lined up a fight with Mike Davis for him because Mike Davis is tall, physical, long, and doesn't have quite the same self-destructive tendencies that McKinney does. And McKinney I've got against Claudio Puelles because it's got a little bit of stature to it. I really do think that there should be some kind of profile to McKinney's next fight. But it's two dudes who have a lot of finishing capability and could have an exciting fight. But at the same time have a grotesque number of holes that I don't really know where they fit in the division. So pair them up and see what happens. Warley Alves versus Nicholas Dalby. I scored all 3 rounds for Dalby, but all the judges gave the third round to Alves. I kind of get it. Like, Alves came out looking menacing and like trying to pressure in the third round and threw some heat. But at the same time was really willing to clinch still and go for takedowns, which is a failure of fight IQ. Like the commentary team was giving him a lot of credit for the third round. And I didn't really get it. Like when he came out and started throwing some bombs, like going for the finish or a 10-8 round, because his corner had clearly told him he was down 2-0. And he went out there with a mission, but then he just got sucked into kind of the same clinch pseudo wrestling exchanges that he got sucked into in the first 2 rounds and ended up getting out-volumed. So this is a good performance from Dalby. He out-volumed him, he put a pace on him, he did his thing. He realized that Alves doesn't really keep up with that and got it done. He's super tough. Like the career of Nicholas Dalby is a roller coaster. Like, this is a guy who is not far removed from losing to Jesse Robinson, is not far removed from kind of lucking his way into a decision against Daniel Rodriguez. But he gets the job done here. So, and this feels like a way better opponent. I mean, I guess it's debatable who's better between Warley Alves and Daniel Rodriguez. But I think Rodriguez is an incredibly slimly built fighter, in the sense that, like, there's no depth to his skill sets, really, and his decision making is suspect. Alves' decision making is also suspect, but he's also a freak athlete and way more powerful. So, I don't know. This feels more impressive to me. One judge gave Alves the second round. That was Derek Cleary. And I hard disagree. I think the Alves corner even would hard disagree that was the case. It wasn't even the Brazilian judge. It was freaking Derek Cleary, who really should thank guys like Sal D'Amato and Doug Crosby for, like, really taking the heat off of him as a crappy judge. Dalby probably won't get this fight, but I think a fight with Brian Barberena would be really, really, really cool, really exciting. It just feels like they kind of like have Barberena positioned a little bit higher in terms of prestige. And for Alves, I've got the winner of Trevin Giles and Preston Parsons. I think it would be a good fight. Giles either way works, but Parsons as a loser would not work. Mostly because I'm not entirely sure Parsons will be around if he loses. Joseanne Nunez versus Zara Farron. Zara Farron won the first round when Nunez struggled with the range. Really struggled with the range throughout. It was really only when Farron gassed out that Nunez started getting some stuff done. This was an ugly fight. Do not go back and watch this fight. Do not. If you miss this fight, please do yourself a favor and don't watch it. It had certain comedic value of a 5'2" featherweight fighting someone, but it's so awkward watching Nunez throw the most overhand punches and still barely hitting the chin. Like, lady, Jessica Andrade fought at 135 because she had to. Nunez is just fighting at 145 to avoid weight cutting, I guess. I don't know. And Farron is just bad. Farron gassed out. Her form is abysmal even when she wasn't gassed out. She just has a raw level of physicality and obviously reach and height that was problematic. She utilized a lot of, like, wrist grabbing technique at range, which Nunez didn't really have an answer for because of how long her arms are. So, with every physical advantage and every possible chance to win, Farron still didn't. And I still don't know why this fight got made, because if the fighters are to be believed, and I'm talking about Norma Dumont, and I'm talking about Chelsea Chandler, I think is her name, the Nick Diaz trained girl who's going to be fighting who fought why am I blanking on her name too? The Lithuanian girl, Julia Stolyarenko, who goes for arm bars. There you go. They told them they had to go down. They supposedly told Aspen Ladd they wouldn't book her at 145. So I don't. If the division doesn't exist, why are we having fights in it? I don't get it. Like, either sign some bodies and make fights happen and hope that develops a better class of fighter, or get rid of it. We're kind of in this weird point where like they're taking away anyone who's actually kind of interesting at featherweight and telling them to go down in weight. And I guess just having others fight out their contracts. I don't know. I have no idea what's next for either lady. Daniel Marcos had a good fight against Simon Oliveira. I remember thinking like people were like talking about how Simon Oliveira was the cleaner fighter and actually had the higher ceiling of the two, and I was just like, I don't get it. Like these, and by people I mean like other podcasts I listen to and so on. They seemed actually really sure that Oliveira was going to win this fight, and instead what we got was Oliveira throwing like a lot of spinning strikes and otherwise just getting outworked, out-techniqued, outclassed by Daniel Marcos. And shooting for like the worst takedowns ever. Because like he'll shoot like from halfway across the octagon, no setup to try to take you down. And it's like, that's not going to work, homie. It's not going to work. Simon Oliveira is a mess. And the fact that people were saying he was the cleaner striker. Oh, Lord. I don't know. Daniel Marcos, good performance. Welcome to UFC, buddy. Trying to put Peru on the map. I actually think he's a really good fighter. I think he has all the basic physical building blocks. He's not a freak or anything. He doesn't have like amazingly high level athleticism that suggests like future champion or anything. But he is legitimately pretty good at everything. And I think it's really all there is to say about that. I think he's a good fighter. Got the job done. He made Oliveira pay late in the fight for trying his like 17th spinning attack. Marcos clipped him, put him against the fence, flurried on him, and the referee stepped in. No, like I think this was really good. Cameron Saman maybe fits. Maybe you won't even go higher than that, but that could work. And then for Oliveira, like I said, Simon Oliveira versus Luan Lacerda. They're two guys who I don't feel bad about seeing booked on a UFC card, but at the same time, I think are incredibly hard capped. And that's your card, basically. It was pretty good. And let's see here what's coming up here. What is the next UFC event? We have a UFC Fight Night coming up. We got Bellator 290 coming up. We got the PFL Challengers Series coming up. Let's have a look at all of that. So for the UFC, we got that Louis Spivak card. That is... Is Adam Fugit legitimately on a main card? Dude lost to Michael Morales and is on a main card, apparently. Against Yusaku Kinoshita, whose name does not ring a bell for me. He's 6-1. Fought on Contender Series. It is a pancrase guy and a deep guy, rising guy. Yeah. Only loss is because he was grabbing the cage. Okay. Well, I guess he's sort of undefeated then. No, this is a bad card. Yeah. I may not even break down this card. Bellator 290. If you can sell me that you are a better card, that's the Fedor versus Bader final fight. For Fedor. Johnny Eblen versus Anatoly Tarkov. That's a little interesting. I like that. I like Sabah Hamasi versus Brennan Ward. But it is kind of falling off a cliff after that. Hey, Max Roshkov. I'm kind of interested in what Max Roshkov can do. I think he got a raw deal. He was the fighter who wanted to quit on the stool that Robert Drysdale coaches. And he got a lot of flack on that. He's super young. I honestly think he can turn into something. Jornel Lugo versus Jalen Bates. Henry Corrales. I like Henry Corrales. I really do. Steve Mowry's on the card. Yeah, Darian Caldwell's on the card. Lorenz Larkin. Yes. No, I'm breaking this card down. So UFC can shove it this week on the podcast. And on the PFL side, not really loving anything about it. It's a lot of Raw fighters. So I guess is technically kind of what a contender series or a challenger series type of thing is supposed to be, in fairness. So yeah, Bellator on February 4th. Is that next week? It just says 1 week from now. But I think it's closer. I think it's closer to like 2 weeks. Actually, we have a week off, don't we? Yeah, I think we have a week off. So yeah. For the next episode, I'm probably just gonna do question and answers / things that are happening. There you go. Or I'll find some regional card maybe to break down. Anyways, so to the left, to the right, above or below, you will find a description for this podcast or video. And there will be a link tree that will tell you where you can consume this podcast other than where you are already. And also links to my social media and my Discord where you can check out the MMA fighting sim. Ooh, sneeze there for a moment. Anyways, I'm going to go sneeze. You should check out the Discord for the simulator, and I will see you next time.